One of the lines requested was a Senate landline. Did you know about that?
I don't recall knowing about any particular lines. My role, as I saw it, was to understand who my prosecutors thought we should be getting toll records for, to make sure we had a basis for that under the statute, a reasonable basis. I don't recall discussions about how they figured out what lines we would be going for.
Did you feel like you had a burden at all to tell, to let the carriers know that we in fact are looking for toll records for numerous United States senators?
I'm sorry, sir. Which statute are you talking about?
The statute applies to the Senate, where you referenced that you think the burden is placed on the carriers to deal with this issue with senators. It doesn't apply to the House, but the senators. In our first hour, you said the burden's on them to, if they're going to let the Senate know that their toll records are going to the government, the burden is on them. And I'm just asking, do you feel like there was any burden on the prosecutor, on you, to tell, to make that public?
To make that public?
Not to make it public, to let the carriers know, we are in fact, make it public to the carriers, we are in fact asking for toll records for United States senators.
Sir, I don't recall discussing that particular statute. I may have. What I meant to communicate was that reading that statute as it existed at the time, reading it now, it's clear to me that the process that was envisioned.
So you didn't know about the statute back when you requested the tolls?
I do not recall discussing this statute. I can't recall if I knew about it then or not.
Okay, there's definitely a burden based on what the Justice Department is now going to do and move forward. There's definitely a burden now, but you didn't think there was any type of burden for you to let the carriers know these numbers we are giving you are numbers for, excuse me, for United States senators.
As you referenced, the statute has now been changed, and before that change, my understanding is that the statute directed carriers to do this analysis, and in fact envisioned that carriers might get.
So there's no burden on you. No burden on the prosecutor. That's what I'm getting at.
My reading of that statute as it was drafted at that time is there was not.
Okay. And you ran the public integrity section back in your days at Justice Department. Is that right?
Correct.
Did you ever get requests for toll records for this internal analysis that you think was, as Steve said, pretty cursory? Did you ever get requests for members of Congress or United States senators, their toll records?
It was some time ago. I'm sure we may have. As I sit here now, I can't remember a specific instance, but I'm not saying.
How long were you head of the public integrity section?
I was the head from May of 2010 until it was either January or February of I believe 2015.
Okay, 5 years, and in that time frame, you don't know if you got, you can't recall, you may have, I think I'm going to be fair to you, that you don't recall any request for the toll records of members of Congress or United States senators.
Well, I'm saying we may well have, and that may well have happened. I just, as I sit here right now, don't recall a specific instance of that. I'm not denying that that happened.
Okay.
Once the department gets the records, what does it do with it? I know the FBI has something they call the Cellular Analysis Survey Team CAST. But do you know what happens with the records once they get them?
The analysis, like how they do the analysis?
Like what do you do with the records?
That would not be in my area of expertise, how the analysis is actually conducted.
And how does that get rolled back into the team?
What do you mean?
The team's work, the prosecutor's work. So you subpoenaed Speaker McCarthy's toll records after he became Speaker, and you sought records from November 2020 through January 8th, 2021. Like, what were you looking for with his records? Like, what did you do with the information you obtained?
Okay, so what, the relevance of those records, there'd be several examples, but his contacts with either co-conspirators, the president, or conduits of information to the president was relevant to our investigation. And an example I could give you is on January 6th, we had information from Mark Meadows, who was present for a call where Congressman McCarthy was asking for help. He was asking the president to come to his aid while the Capitol was being seized. Getting the exact toll records for when that happened was relevant for our investigation, both to question other witnesses about, so we had an accurate timeline, and also to corroborate that the call happened at approximately the time witnesses said it happened.
But it's pretty significant to subpoena the Speaker of the House's toll records, right?
We followed department policy and we followed all legal requirements in getting those records.
I mean, you know, to get the information you're looking for, nobody disputed the Speaker and the President were having communications on January 6th. So one way you could have gotten that information is you could have asked the Speaker's lawyer to look at his phone records and to give you the information you needed, right?
Well, you say now that nobody's disputing, but my experience in criminal investigations is that people often at trial dispute things that you never thought were going to be in dispute during the investigation. And so when I conduct a criminal investigation, I don't assume there will be no disputes. Having a record that is a hard record about a time, and the timeline of that afternoon was particularly important because that violence started. The president refused to stop it. He endangered the life of his vice president. Then he's getting calls, and not calls from Democrats, not calls from people he doesn't know, calls from people he trusts, calls from people he relies on, and still refuses to come to the aid of the people at the Capitol. That's very important evidence for criminal intent in our case.
Right, but you could have asked Elliot Burke for that information, the Speaker's lawyer. You could have asked Elliot Burke to say, can you get us the Speaker's, phone records for this time? And he probably would have said, of course. Avoiding a toll record subpoena.
And your question?
Why didn't you do that?
We got these records in a manner that was consistent with the law and consistent with department policy. There was nothing improper about how we got these records.
The same with Representative Perry's phone. I mean, you could have asked Representative Perry's lawyer. I mean, there's no evidence that Representative Perry or Speaker McCarthy was interested in obstructing your work, was there?
I don't have any evidence that Speaker McCarthy was, I don't recall any evidence, I should say, that Speaker McCarthy was interested in obstructing our work.
Okay. So with Representative Perry, you could have contacted his lawyer and you could have said, this is what we're looking for. Can you help us achieve this without seizing his phone?
Well, with Congressman Perry, I should point out that the seizure of his phone happened several months before I was ever special counsel. I wasn't
Fair.
involved in that process.
Yeah, okay. But in hindsight, would you have counseled taking a different avenue to acquiring a member's phone?
I'm not going to speculate on investigative steps that occurred before I became special counsel.
Okay. When obtaining the toll records of members of Congress or anyone, what is the standard? Must there be some evidence that relates to a criminal prosecution or criminal investigation?
So there has to be a reasonable basis to believe that there will be materially relevant evidence.
Okay. Now, with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the subpoena, with Speaker McCarthy, the subpoena, the timeframe was November 2020 through January 8th, 2021. With the now chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the timeframe went back to January 2020. So it was for a full year where, between January 2020 and December of 2020, nobody had any telephone calls about these matters. I'm just curious why you went back to January 2020, the office did.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. When you say you went back, can we just get the date of when these
It was May
subpoenas were
1st,
issued?
2022, and it was before you were appointed. When I say you, I apologize. I mean the office, the effort. I mean, this was before you became special counsel. The DC matters were headed up by Thomas Wyndham, as I understand it,
I believe that's right.
and the Florida matters were headed up by Jay Bratt.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And so the question is, why would DOJ, why would the team seek records from January 2020, through November of that year, before any of these issues, before anyone knew about any of these issues?
Yeah, I played no role in that subpoena. I was still in Europe at the time. And because I wasn't present or involved, I'm not going to speculate on the basis for the range of time that the prosecutors in that case saw it.
Okay. After you became the special counsel, that information obtained from the subpoena, was available to the special counsel team. What did the team do with it after you became, after you were sworn in?
You mean, when you say that information, you're talking about the
The
total?
total record subpoena for the chairman of the committee.
Well, I can tell you that, for example, there was contact on, for example, January 6th, that again, another example for you is Mark Meadows, when we interviewed him, he referenced the fact that afternoon, Chairman Jordan had been in contact with the White House, and like Congressman McCarthy's contact with the White House, it was relevant because, and again, Meadows stated this, that these were supporters, these were credible people that the president relied on. And what I recall was Meadows stating that I've never seen Jim Jordan scared of anything. And the fact that we were in this different situation now where people were scared really made it clear that what was going on at the Capitol could not be mistaken for anything than what it was. And it goes back to that sort of information from someone who is a credible source to the president, proving that actually happened and that there's actually a record of that call and exactly when it happened and what actions happened after that or didn't happen after that, extremely probative to our case.
Right, but DOJ took Mr. Jordan's phone records from January 2020 through November, through January of the subsequent. I mean, what on earth could the Justice Department want with his phone records before time's relevant?
Sure, and the breadth of that subpoena was before I was special counsel, and I wasn't involved in the deliberations about seeking that subpoena or the breadth of it, and so I can't speak to that.
Okay. Can you see from our point of view that there's a perception that there's some overreach going on there?
I understand your question. I don't have any, and I do understand it, I don't have any reason to believe that subpoena was secured for any improper purpose or that it was secured in contravention of department regulations or the law.
Okay. And in terms of who is involved with the authorizations for that type of subpoena, it's your team, it's public integrity, any other Justice Department component?
I cannot speak to that before I was special counsel. I can say that when I was special counsel, I was the person who approved subpoenas of that nature.
Okay.
And with, of course, the fact that I wanted consultation with public integrity.
Okay. So that was the universe of DOJ authorization. It was you and public integrity. You didn't have to go to the DAG. You didn't have to go to OLC, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When the subpoena was served for certain members of the Judiciary Committee, it was served by an official at the Department of Justice's Inspector General. which, from our point of view, raises a conflict of interest. I mean, the Inspector General is supposed to be conducting oversight, if necessary, of department components. Certainly, if department components are being real aggressive with members of Congress, we might want the IG to conduct a probe of that, right? But if the IG's on your team and they're doing this with you, that presents a problem for us. And so the question is, why was the IG's office serving these subpoenas? Why were they, they went in, I know it was before you were the special counsel, but they went on the Perry search. They took his phone and then they imaged his phone. I mean, the IG here is just like a regular part of the team. Can you explain why that happened?
Yes, with the understanding that I obviously wasn't in that decision chain because I wasn't involved in the case, but my understanding is that the Jeffrey Clark component of this investigation, he was a Department of Justice employee during the period of time that we were, and my predecessors were investigating this, and it's my understanding that is why they were involved in the investigation.
But, understood, but why, when it comes to members of Congress, didn't, like, I don't understand, I understand they have the Jeffrey Clark investigation going on, but when it comes to members of Congress, I mean, the IG has a special, relationship with Congress. Why are they allowed to be involved?
Again, all I can tell you is what I just told you. This was before my time, but my understanding about why it occurred is because they were involved in that aspect of the
Okay.
investigation.
And were they involved after you became the special counsel? Were they involved in serving toll record subpoenas related to members of Congress, to your knowledge?
My recollection is that they may still have been involved. My primary dealings were with the FBI, but they may well have stayed as part of the investigation. I didn't have a lot of interaction with them.
Okay. And when some of these toll record subpoenas were served by the IG's office, do you know whether they knew they were serving toll record subpoenas relating to a member of Congress?
Are you talking about in the period of time when I was special counsel or before?
When you were the special counsel?
Okay, as I sit here, just to be clear, I'm not aware, I don't recollect that people in the DOJ Inspector General's office were serving subpoenas during my time.
Okay.
Could well be, I just don't have recollection of that.
Okay. I can represent to you that they did serve subpoenas before your time. I mean, they served one in May of 2022 relating to the chairman of the committee.
Yeah, and as I said, before my time, I can't speak to that because I was in Europe, I wasn't in the investigation.
But after you became, after you were appointed, that wasn't occurring to the best of your knowledge?
I just don't have a recollection of that.
Okay.
But I want to just to be clear, I'm not sure in my role I would know which individual agent was serving a subpoena, so that's not something I would have necessarily known in the first place. Just I wanted to make that clear.
Fair enough, but if it was from the IG's office, wouldn't that raise like an issue?
I'm just saying to you, in my role, I was not like directing which agent would serve which subpoena.
Okay. Did you have interactions with the IG's office on the Jeff Clark matter?
I can't think of any now, but I don't want to say that it may have been possible I did, but as I sit here now, I can't think of any.
I mean, were they a part of the team after you were appointed?
That's what I said earlier. My recollection is that they were.
Okay. With the toll record subpoenas for the senators, one of the lines requested was a Senate landline. Did you know about that?
I don't recall knowing about any particular lines. My role, as I saw it, was to understand who my prosecutors thought we should be getting toll records for, to make sure we had a basis for that under the statute, a reasonable basis. I don't recall discussions about how they figured out what lines we would be going for.
Because at least in the House, if you place a call from a landline in the House, it goes out scrambled. So you know, to the extent DOJ thinks they have the right number, it's, you know, it would be scrambled. And so it's just raises questions as to why the office would subpoena toll records for a Senate landline. And you don't have any additional information or recollections on that?
I really don't.
Okay. There was some litigation with AT&T over the subpoenas for the Senate lines. Do you have any recollection of that?
Was it litigation, or was, I know I saw, or I was shown that there was a letter that, from AT&T to Senator Grassley. I don't recall any litigation.
Okay. Maybe litigation was the wrong word, but AT&T, I guess, pushed back on the toll records subpoena. And according to them, after they pushed back and said they weren't comfortable producing the records, the special counsel's office stood down. Do you have any recollections from that?
I don't have any recollection of that.
Okay. You know, and essentially AT&T represented, at least to Senator Grassley's office, that, you know, after they said, no, we're not going to give you those records, your office didn't press the matter further, which raises the question why. But your
Well,
testimony is you don't have any recollection of that?
I don't have any recollection of it. I also don't know from the letter what the reason they gave for not giving it, but I don't have a memory of any of this.
Okay. You know, to the extent the members of Congress and senators are up in arms that this happened to them and they're seeking accountability, you know, who should be held accountable for answering these questions?
Well, I think who should be accountable for this is Donald Trump. These records are people, in the case of the senators, Donald Trump directed his co-conspirators to call these people to further delay the proceedings. He chose to do that. If Donald Trump had chosen to call a number of Democratic senators, we would have got toll records for a number of Democratic senators. So responsibility for why these records, why we collected them, that lies with Donald Trump.
Well, I understand that's your perspective, but in terms of, there are calls from United States senators to impeach Judge Boasberg because he signed this NDO order. We've asked you questions, you know, for a good bit now about whether your office should have taken additional steps. So it's either your office, you know, the judge, the carrier. In your view, who needs to be held to account on these toll record subpoenas?
Well, I don't, certainly my office did everything consistent with the law and department regulations at the time. As I think we referenced earlier this morning, the department regulations on this, since we issued these toll records, has changed. If I believe now, and I believe this is in 2024, if we were to make an NDO application to a judge, we would need to identify if they were members of Congress. And so to the extent you think something needs to be changed, that change happened.
Okay.
But that was not required at the time that we issued these subpoenas.
Okay.
Sort of begs the point though, doesn't it? Don't you think? Sort of begs the point, like, it makes the point, like, maybe that should have been the standard, it should have been a burden on the prosecution to actually give that information to the carriers. Would you agree?
No, as I said earlier, I think we followed the regulations that they existed at the time. If the regulations that are now in effect were in effect then, we would have followed those regulations.